Okay, we've all been there. We're interviewing for a new sales position. Sales position has come open. We've got some great candidates, and we do what we've always done. We talk about selling with the candidate, and we review their resume in detail, and we talk salary and benefits and all of those kinds of things because we've got the right person, and we give them the offer letter. And then at 90 days, they're not meeting our expectations. But the question is, did you really set any expectations? This is Sales Untraining, a very different kind of sales podcast. 3 out of 4 salespeople are failing. They're falling short of their revenue. Why doesn't sales training work? That's what this sales podcast is about. It's your weekly sales strategy guide designed to rewire your sales brain. Welcome to Sales Untraining. I'm Kelly Riggs. Really great to have you alongside as I welcome in a special guest for that podcast that we talk about every week. It is your weekly sales strategy guide designed to completely rewire your sales brain. He's Michael Lane. He is the founder of SG Partners, and he's joining me way over on the other side of the world in Australia. Actually, Michael, my second guest from Australia. Really great to have you alongside. Tell us a little bit about your background, then we're going to dive in and talk about hiring salespeople and how we struggle with that a lot of times.
Kelly, much appreciated, and thank you for having me on your podcast. Yes, all the way from Australia, the down under place, where, yes, in the toilet, the water does go around a different way. Typically, what I've been doing for the last 16 years is helping leadership and sales organizations be more effective. And really, when it comes down to it, it's all about communication. But if I started a company called, hey, I help you be even more effective about communication, the money wouldn't have rolled in. So I started a company, and SG Partners is really about strategic growth partners. And everything we do is help people become aware of themselves. So there's always some analysis. And then we help them develop to where they want to be. And when it comes to sales teams, it's the effectiveness. So it's not just the human resource as a salesperson or a sales leader, it's everything around it, which includes leadership. And over the 16 years, I've also been doing a lot of sales recruitment. Sales recruitment as in I will do the recruitment from end to end for my clients, or I'll teach them how to fish.
Yeah.
And so I've got a lot of content, a lot of stories about what really makes an effective recruitment process and how do we measure that effectiveness. So glad to be here and looking forward to this conversation.
I'm so glad we connected because I love your approach. It's a systemic approach, a holistic approach. So many times sales leaders, even CEOs, are looking for that one magic bullet or that one thing that we can do different. And I'm sure, Michael, you've seen it like I have. It was going to be CRM or social media or something, that was going to really turn the right lever, pull the right lever to make everything better. But in the end, it comes down to 3 very significant components. It comes down to getting the right talent, unique talent. It comes down to leadership, as you mentioned, and certainly it comes down to those bulletproof processes that you've got to have in place in order to create the equation. But we make so many mistakes in hiring. In past podcasts, I've talked about promoting our top salesperson to sales leader. We know what happens there. But let's talk a little bit about the interview process and what happens when we really struggle to hire effectively simply because we don't know how to hire effectively. So many sales leaders, Michael, are just told, hey, go hire your people. But that oftentimes turns out to be a disaster, doesn't it?
Well, first of all, it's a disaster because the actual person you're asking to hire does not know what to do because they probably shouldn't be in the sales leadership role, right? Because only 10% of sales leaders should actually be in sales leadership role, right?
Right.
So let's start with the first problem, the leader asking someone else to go hire. If we don't understand the expectations of the leader, then how do we fulfill their requirements? So there has to be some sort of pushback to the leader and say, well, exactly what do we want? And one of the first questions I ask any leadership, I said, do you have a sales strategy in writing? And of course they say no. And I said, well, okay, so what's the plan? What's the journey? And who do the people you need to get to the outcome? They go, do it. And I said, well, that's where we first start, right? And then based on the strategy, you will then understand the organized sales organization you need and the spots that are empty, and therefore start to tease a criteria out for success. So the number one thing is, do you have a strategy? And most don't. Number two, what's the criteria? And I've got someone I'm helping in Canada at the moment. And I'm actually hiring a VP of sales. Said, right, give me the criteria. And the standard criteria, whether it's sales leaders or sales leaders, they know the market, they know the application, they know the product, and by the way, they can sell. And I said, that was your fourth, right? That's your fourth criteria. And I get it why they say they know the market, they know the application, because they just want to hit the people to hit the ground running. Because if they hit the ground running, that means as a leader, whether I'm a sales leader or a leader of the organization, I don't have to invest any of my time onboarding them. So that's why they want, right? And I said, oh, so you want a unicorn, but here's the challenge. What if there was someone that knew your marketplace and the application, your product, and was an average salesperson? Oh, that wouldn't be any good. I said, well, what's the most important criteria? It takes a little bit of time for me to get the sales component as the most important criteria. Because heck, you could train them on the industry. You can train them on the application, and you can introduce them to the freaking industry, right? But do you want to take 6 months or 12 months to train them how to sell? And so many times I've had employers say, well, I hired a professional salesperson. They should know how to do that. I said, well, did you hire a professional salesperson? How would you know? So the criteria is one of the most important aspects. And the criteria that I develop with people is the experience, the culture, the attitude, and the skills and the DNA.
Yeah.
Now, just so happens the skills and right.
Yeah, I got to chuckle. I mean, I have to laugh even at that point. Clearly, it would be nice if the VP sales knew how to sell, but in all the things you've listed, I would say, hang on, I'm a little confused. Do they really need to know how to develop salespeople? I mean, as the sales leader, who's going to be accountable for developing, coaching, training the sales team? And that wasn't even in your criteria? Holy cow, no wonder we have a hiring problem.
Well, hiring is not that easy, but then onboarding them to be successful is where the work is.
Yes.
As a salesperson, I've decided to leave the company I'm with and go work with your company. I remember reading a stats. It's like 6 weeks it takes a salesperson in a new company to realize they actually made the right decision or not.
Wow.
So it's quite an emotional journey for them.
Sure.
So as much as the employer says, well, I'm here filtering out the right candidate, well, the candidate's also filtering you. And if you get it wrong, both parties lose out of this equation. And I've seen this happen so many times. I had a brilliant salesperson undersold themselves as far as salary, put him into an organization and sort of had an inkling, but then it really came out that the leader of the business, the owner of the business, was bipolar. And so he was a control freak and kept asking this salesperson to do it his way rather than a salesperson's way. So what actually happened? The salesperson says, I'm out of here. Right? You're not allowing me to do what I know to do really well. So one of the other things that is really important and the mistake that's made is actually understanding the onboarding process and the continual coaching and measuring on right. And as you said before, if you don't have the right sales process, if you don't have the right sales methodology, you don't have the right systems and processes in place, the salesperson will make up their own. They'll use whatever they've used in the past. And that might not be successful for your organization.
Right.
For instance, just imagine that I'm a lone wolf salespeople, right? There's lots of them out there.
Oh, for sure.
And I've got a client right now where one of their top cultural criteria was they have to be collaborators. And so they actually had a candidate. We screened them, looked great. They interviewed them, and they said, look, could you interview them? So I interviewed the candidate, and so many times a red flag popped up that this guy was a lone wolf. He was operating from home, away from the head office. He was complaining about how the head office didn't treat him, so he made up his own rules.
Wow.
And how this wasn't working out. So I just heard this time and time again in the interview, and I said to my client, he's a lone wolf. You want collaboration, he's not going to comply.
Well, let me ask you, Michael, we fail a lot when it comes to hiring. In fact, one of the old adages is many times the very best selling that some salespeople do is in the interview. But why? Yeah. why do we have such a turnover rate, a high failure rate in hiring? What do you see as maybe one or two of the biggest mistakes beyond setting those criteria? So how do we get fooled so often?
Because we allow ourselves to get fooled, right? I mean, I've been there myself, Kelly, in
Yeah, so
my
have
own
I.
company, one of the salesperson in my own company, right? And I know this stuff. And I had the readings from this sales screen assessment, and it said he had low commitment, right? And I should know better. But I'm interviewing this guy. This guy does ultra marathons. Right? Now that takes freaking commitment, right? To
Right.
train,
Right.
right? And to actually do the thing. And I'm thinking, no way can he have this much commitment in doing ultra marathons and not have the same commitment in sales. Well, when I
Mm,
hired him and we did all the right stuff, 5 o'clock came and he left his laptop in the office, he left his mobile phone in the office,
wow.
right? Time and time again. And so there is a difference between, I think it's our filters, our belief systems. So as a leader of the business or a sales leader, we have a belief, we have a filter. This is what a great salesperson looks like or feels like, which may not be correct because it's our beliefs, right? And so we're going to filter the candidate on what we like to hear. And a lot of sales leaders, we know that aren't effective sales leaders, they're salespersons. So
Yes.
their filter is going to be how I would do this. So they're hiring themselves, good, bad, and the ugly. And leaders usually have no freaking idea what makes a great salesperson. So
Right.
they're saying, well, I really don't like salespeople because I think they're pushy, slimy, used car. So I want to hire someone that's totally opposite.
Right.
So a salesperson that is, a great person, nice to be liked and talks all the technical garb. Hey, here's one that I want to represent me.
Right.
But that's not what I really need. So
Right.
understanding our own limiting beliefs, understanding our own filters is the first part. Because if we don't, then we're just going to hire the same way time and time again. So it's self-awareness, pull ourselves apart and say, well, what do we really think and what do we need to think? And how
Right.
do we filter that?
Yeah.
The second mistake is when we do the interviews, we talk way too much. We sell them the role, right?
That sounds
And I
like
say to
salespeople
candidates,
to me, doesn't it to you?
so tell us about the interview. Oh, yeah, it went really well. They always say that, even though it might have. And just like they say the sales call went really well. And I
Right.
said, who talked the most? Oh, they did. Did they ask you any questions? No, not so much. They're just telling me about the role and how great the company was. And I'm thinking, okay, that's doomed to fail, right?
Yeah.
So I think what happens is leaders get emotionally involved with the candidates from the CV because I don't know, the CV says you know the marketplace, you know the application, you know the product, winner, winner, chicken dinner, right?
Right.
So they're emotionally involved. So they're not objectively pulling apart the CV. They're not objectively pulling apart the person. So they go through that interview. Then the second interview, well, hey, I'm already in love with this person. Let's just make it happen. Meanwhile, it's really interesting. You mentioned that the salespeople, average salespeople sell themselves really well during the interview.
Oh yeah.
Average, right?
Yeah.
So we know most average salespeople are tellers, not questioners.
Yes.
So they come into the interview and they're not asking questions. They're telling. So
Hmm.
they're not exploring their potential employer to ensure it's the right fit for them. And I've seen CVs and I talk to candidates that go from one job to another with the same problem time and time again. They were sold a story and
Right.
the story didn't develop. And I said, that's on you as a candidate. You didn't ask the right questions. And so great salespeople, here's the three things that great salespeople, when I interview them as candidates, want, or the reason why they're leaving. We all know their leaders suck, right?
Right.
That's a known, right?
Universally.
Their input's not being their input's not being taken on board,
Right.
and there's no growth, there's no challenge. So that's why great salespeople leave. So when I'm interviewing salespeople, I'm looking for, is that what you're looking for? And they say yes. Well, if my client is not wired that way, meaning their leadership sucks, so they're not going to be able to join up with you,
Right.
and they really don't seek input, and they don't have any growth in developing you as a person or growth in their organization. So
Right.
therefore, this great salesperson is going to find the wrong home. They're not going to last. So I'm very attuned now to making sure that both parties are really finding out about each other, and they need coaching on that.
Yeah, that's really good. That's so good. But by the way, full disclosure, if you're listening to Michael and I, he mentioned something about commitment. And if you're listening in, you may be saying, yes, but how do I measure commitment? How do I know about commitment? Well, as it turns out, both Michael and I are partnered with a company called Objective Management Group, which actually does the only sales competency based assessment that is out there. And it looks at 21 very specific sales competencies. And one of those competencies is the will to sell. And part of that is desire, commitment, motivation, responsibility. Those things are critically important. And this tool, Michael, is so incredibly valuable because it gives you insight into someone who looks like they can sell, but they won't for the very reasons that you talked about. Tell us about using that particular assessment.
So let's go back to 16 years ago. So we were doing sales training. That's how we started our company. And then owners of the business would say to me during the breaks, Michael, what do you think about our sales team? Now, my response was being subjective because it depends how I feel on the day, depends how they're interacting. My response is going to be that. And
Right.
after a while, I got a bit uncomfortable about this because if they're seeking my advice, they're going to take my answers somewhat. So therefore, the salespeople's livelihood was in my hand in some respect about the feedback I was giving the owner. And I
Right.
said, there has to be a better way to objectively understand. So I got involved with Objective Manager Group and started evaluating sales teams before we did development of the teams. And then a great client said, well, I need someone to hire, and I'm just going to do what I've always done. So, Michael, can you recruit? And I said, that'll be easy, right? So,
Sure.
you put the advert out, you get all these CVs, and I was just like them, falling in love with. They know the market, they know the application, they know the product.
Right.
And Objective Management said, hey, we've got a tool that you can screen candidates. I said, sure, not a problem. So I screened the candidate, and the ideal candidate didn't come back too flash. And I'm going, oh, this must be wrong. This tool must be wrong, right? Because of my
Absolutely.
filters, right? Anyway, I leaned in just a little bit more, challenged my limiting belief, and I started interviewing according to the interviewing questions from the evaluation, from the screen report. And suddenly all these things unraveled. And I thought, there is something to this, right? So for 16 years, I've been using this screening tool and helped my clients with the screening tool. And without a doubt, got so many references. I've helped people make great decisions. And there's two decisions: hiring great people and not hiring people.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly right.
So it's unbelievable. It is the only tool that all the questions are around sales. It's not a personality. I say to people, I don't care if you're the axe murderer or Santa Claus. I really don't care. What I care about is what are you bringing to the table to sell or to be a sales leader.
Right.
And a client asked me to interview a sales leader who was asking a lot of money. I evaluated him and I interviewed him. And at the end, I said, you're asking for a lot of money. You've never been trained on sales leadership. You don't understand sales process. You have no idea about pipeline management. Actually, you're full of it. I said, how dare you apply for this role? That's how I interviewed. He was sweating, right? Because the industry allows these people to just be recycled and recycled. I have
Absolutely.
an ownership to get the very best person for my clients.
Yes.
And the evaluation gives me insights that no one else would know. Not even the candidate knows this about themselves. So I
Right.
now know what to focus on during the interview. And I go hard, right? Because I want to find out what really resonates, the truth, the whole truth. One of the
Absolutely.
first questions I ask every candidate, is your CV the truth? And I said, yes. I
Oh,
said, are you
well,
sure?
that's gold. I love that.
Right.
That's
I
awesome.
said, are you sure? They said, yes. I said, do you change your CV depending upon the role that you're going for? They said, yes. I said, are you sure? They said, yes. Let's go. And I've already found inconsistencies either via LinkedIn or through their CV. And so I'll pinpoint those inconsistencies. To me, well, that's a bit horrible. Well, okay, let's take sales. Sales is one of the most uncomfortable roles you could have. And people lie to you all the time. And people tell you stuff that you don't know that you should know, and vice versa. It is one of the most emotionally engaged roles that you can have. And if you can't control your emotions, if you can't stay in control of the conversation, then you'll be dead. And that's the same with sales leadership. right? Sales leadership, I think, is one of the hardest roles because
I
you're the
agree.
buffer between all these emotional people, these sales people, and all these people in your organization have no idea what sales is about, right? You're the guy and the girl in the middle. It sucks, right? So if you're not switched on how to manage both, you will fail.
All right, very good stuff. Man, listen, if you're listening, if you're joining us, you're getting some real insights as to the kind of mistakes that we make when we're trying to hire salespeople. You can get better, a lot better. Use a good assessment from OMG. Learn how to ask the right questions, tell the truth, get deep into the CV. All of this is gold. But let's switch gears, Michael, because coming up next, we're going to talk about a scenario where we think we found the right person. And what happens for many sales leaders is they fail to set clear expectations for that role and what they expect out of that person as they go forward. Coming up next, we're going to talk about exactly what those expectations look like. Stay with us. I'm Kelly Riggs, host of the Sales Untraining podcast. A couple of quick questions for you. Do you hire salespeople? Is sales turnover far too high in your organization? Do you struggle to find A players for your sales team? Well, these are very common questions, and there is a better way to hire. I'm a partner with Objective Management Group, OMG, and they have been assessing sales candidates for over 30 years. In fact, they've assessed over 2.5 million salespeople. Now, this is a very different type of assessment. First thing out of your mind is it another behavioral assessment? Is it a psychometric tool? Is it a personality quiz? No, nothing like that. It is based on 21 very specific sales competencies. And you need to listen to this. This is crazy. It is 91% predictive of sales performance. That's right, 91% predictive. You can't even make a claim like that without the science behind it. Listen, if you struggle to find the right people, or if you just need a lot more help in the hiring process and making sure you're getting in front of the right people to hire, please email me, kelly@bizlockerroom.com. Oh, by the way, and you can absolutely try it for free, and it has a guarantee. kelly@bizlockerroom.com. Back to the show. Welcome back to Sales Untraining. I'm Kelly Riggs, and it is really good to have you with us. Hey, I want to take a second, ask you to like and subscribe to the podcast, but even more importantly for me, if you hear things that you like and you know people who would like to be in this conversation, that conversation that sounds like, what in the world is wrong with sales training, then I hope you'll share the podcast with them. Michael, there is so much wrong with sales training. And as I like to always say, that's just not some contrarian opinion. When roughly 6% of salespeople are considered elite, and maybe another 15% do pretty good, but 3 out of 4 generally are failing. That doesn't bode well for sales training. And in this particular episode, we're talking about raw material. You can't train something that's not trainable to begin with. That's a serious problem. But let's talk about the one that you got that you really like. Okay, you're going to make an offer. And before you make that offer, you and I contend we really need to be crystal clear about the expectations that we're going to have for them in that role. Tell me what those expectations sound like from your perspective for that candidate before they sign the offer letter. What do you want them to be clear about?
So the final interview with the candidate is you're already in love with them, I get it, right? And you already want to make an offer. Right. This is a clincher interview. I want my clients to be very clear, crystal clear about the expectations. So there's a couple of expectations that we have a plan and we want you to stick to the plan, or we don't. Right? So we have a strategy. Here's a plan. We want you to come and implement the plan, or go for it.
Right.
Hunt whoever you want to hunt, call whoever you want to call, or we have this marketplace, we have this type of client, we have this type of accounts, right?
Right.
So that's very clear, because some salespeople can't follow a plan. They don't want to follow a plan. Why? Because they've never been held accountable to a plan.
Exactly.
So you've got to understand where they're willing to do it and they know they're going to be held accountable to do it. The second is we live by our numbers. Some organizations are pretty blasé about that, right? And they will give 3, 6, I don't know, 12 months, 18 months to a salesperson that hasn't met target for the last 6 months,
Right.
which comes back to sales leadership and leadership accountability. I get it. But be very clear to say, hey, we are an organization that live or die by our targets. Our shareholders require that. Therefore, here's my expectations that once the onboarding, this is what I expect of you and this is what I hold accountable, right? And if you're not, this is what happens.
Right.
And when I say this is what happens, as in this is the exit process.
Right.
And the third one is we have sales process, we have systems, we have CRM, we live or die by it, or we don't,
Right.
right? So many organizations complain that the salesperson doesn't comply with the rules around CRM, the rules around the sales process, or other tools that they have. So if you're an organization that's inclined to do that, be articulate it. This is the expectation. And if you don't, here's what happens.
Yeah.
Right?
It seems elementary, but I had a conversation today with a sales manager, and we were talking about one of his salespeople. Terrific individual, works hard, will stay late, will do whatever is necessary, runs about 80% of plan consistently. And I said, are you fine with that? Are you happy with that? Well, no, I'm not. I said, then why do you allow it? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, they've been here 3 years and you allow them to consistently be 20% off plan. How is that even possible if you set a very clear expectation for them? The most common problem I think we probably run into with salespeople, Michael, is they're allowed to underperform with impunity. And when you say that, people are like, oh, you're one of those guys that wants to just come in and fire everybody. No, not at all.
Okay. So here's why this happens. The sales leader talks a talk, but can't walk it.
Right.
And the reason why is, Kelly, when you think about it, most of society is uncomfortable with other people being uncomfortable. We grow up in a society generally that favors harmony versus truth.
Oh, wow.
So when we're young, we constantly hear, "Oh, just let it go, keep the peace, don't create a fuss." So that's harmony.
Right.
So I'm constantly fascinated that in our own family group, when we have kids, we hold our children accountable. And yet, as soon as we step over the threshold of a company door, we suddenly lose that mindfulness to do the same with our employees. So while the sales manager is talking the big talk, what he's not doing is being comfortable with making the salesperson uncomfortable with what he's not doing.
Right.
Secondly, the sales leader says, 80% is okay because if it's not okay and I get rid of him, I have to go hire. And between hiring, I have to do their job, which I don't want to do. And when I do hire, I really don't know what I'm doing. Then I've got to onboard them and I don't want to do that. So I'll put up with mediocre.
Yes.
But the other important thing is the leader of the sales manager that you're talking to allows it to happen as well. See, all the way to the top. This lack of accountability, this lack of being involved. Right?
Yes.
So when I first started my sales training development career, I was actually doing a consultancy gig for a client. So I was their de facto sales manager, right? And there was a salesperson on the team, and for 3 months I busted my gut to turn them around. And every night I'd complain to my wife. My wife said, "You can do this." She was part of the problem. She believed in me. After 3 months, I went to the managing director and I said, "This guy's not going to make it." He said, "I've been waiting for you to come and see me." I said, "You got to be on me. You already knew this. You could have told me 3 months ago." And what it came down to is he didn't have the guts to get rid of the salesperson. He wanted me to get rid of it.
Right. Right.
Right.
Well, I love I love the expectations. Very clear. Listen, we have a plan. I expect you to follow it. Or if the plan's not working, I expect you to develop a new plan. Either one of those is very clear in terms of expectations.
Yeah.
By the way, we have very clear KPIs. We have very clear numbers, and we're serious about it. And I can recall as a very young sales manager, I did very few things well, Michael. But as I found out later, one of the things that I did well is I would tell new hires, listen, if you're less than 85% of quota for 2 quarters in a row, you're subject to dismissal. I'm serious about that. Now, there's nothing I won't do to help you, but make no mistake, I can't allow you to fall below 85%. It was amazing what would happen at the end of a quarter. People were calling saying, okay, hey, we need to get on this. What do we need to do? Simply by setting that expectation very clearly. And then the third one you say is, hey, we've got processes that we follow. And I am shocked at how many organizations that actually do have a pretty good process. I mean, it's rare, but they have it, but they don't even require their people to follow that process. Right? I mean, this is a leadership problem top to bottom, isn't it?
Damn straight. Now, in saying those three things in an interview, what we also need to understand is what is the evidence criteria we need from the candidate that they will comply. So if we say to them, we have a plan, we want you to follow the plan, and the candidate says, yeah, sure, not a problem, and yet when they start with us, they don't, what's the evidence criteria that we could ask for to confirm that they understand, right? What examples are we going to look for that we should be doing during the reference checking, right, to confirm? Same with numbers, KPIs. What's the evidence criteria? I mean, how would you know a salesperson has consistently met their numbers quarter by quarter? Well, I normally say, well, if the salesperson's getting commission, they've probably got the bank statements to confirm that.
Sure.
Have they got letters of commendations, awards, or whatever? Show it to me. If you said that you're a top salesperson year after year, great. What's the evidence?
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
when they crumble. I said, you shouldn't be. You don't have evidence to show me how great you were. Right?
Let me ask you a question, Michael. Have you ever known a top salesperson that doesn't have all of that evidence readily available? I mean, they're proud of it, right? I mean, they don't just make the claim. They've got the goods.
I had an interview with a candidate once, and he actually brought in his physical Rolodex, all his business cards, right? Only happened once. I said, great, give them to me. Now, I happen to know the industry, and I said, look, as I'm asking you questions, I'm just going to go through these cards. And I'm going through these cards, and I said, stop, I know this guy, so I'm going to ring him. What's he going to tell me about you? Right? That's the type of evidence criteria that I look for. You say, so-and-so. Oh, so do I. I'm going to ring them. What are they going to tell me about you? Right? And you're going to see whether they're going to keep composure or not. Because I've had so many sales candidates say, I know everyone. I said, I don't care who you know. I want to know what you do with them. Right?
That's a great point.
So the other thing we've got to do as sales leaders and leaders is we've got to understand what's the evidence criteria. How would I know as a candidate that you're saying you will because you have?
Absolutely.
You will because you have.
That's right? Such good stuff.
You tell me that you tell me you live and breathe the CRM. Well, I'm going to ring up one of your references and ask them, what are they going to tell me?
Right. The threat of reference check is always a powerful tool in the interview process. Yeah. Great stuff. He's Michael Lane. He's founder of SG Partners in Australia, resident of Brisbane, Australia. Tell us where we can find out more about you, Michael.
Well, website, sgpartners.com.au or LinkedIn, Michael Lang at SG Partners. Really appreciate this, Kelly. What I want to emphasize to people listening to this is you can get better.
Yes.
But just like anything in life, you need to lean in and discover what better is. And the first place to start is yourself. Get self-aware of what your beliefs are, what your filters are, because when you're reviewing another person, you're going to overlay that. And there is a saying that most of us like to hang around with people like ourselves. So when we're hiring people with the same values, same beliefs, and some of those beliefs could be strengths and weaknesses, our weaknesses.
Right.
So we need to be aware of what that is. And, if we need someone different to enact upon the strategy, then we need to get someone different to us. And yeah, it's going to hurt, but it's also going to challenge us to rise to the occasion.
Absolutely. Fantastic summary. Michael Lane, thanks so much. I'm Kelly Riggs. This is Sales Untraining, and I'll see you next time.
Sales Untraining is a production of Business Locker Room and Pod About It Productions. Music and editing by Doug Branson. To get more Kelly, visit bizlockerroom.com.